It's the final Monday in May. It's a public holiday in the UK, so most people would probably sleep in and spend the day doing whatever they want, enjoying not having to go to work. But near the town of Brockworth in Gloucestershire, on the edge of the Cotswolds, there's a crowd gathering at the top of a scarily steep, grassy slope in anticipation of a unique annual event. It's race day. And as it gets closer to midday, a small group of racers sits at the edge of the slope, waiting for the signal to start. There's a flash of movement as a wheel of double Gloucester cheese is rolled down the slope, and moments later, the runners take off after it at speed. This is the infamous cheese rolling race of Cooper's Hill. Hey there, cheese historians, I'm Julia and this is Cheese History, a channel where we talk about the history of cheese in all of its weird and wonderfulness. And it turns out that there are some pretty strange events involving cheese out there. And in this video, we're talking about one of them, cheese rolling. Specifically, the annual event at Cooper's Hill near Brockworth, which is today on the edge of Gloucester in England, where eager participants chase a cheese down a very steep hill. Yes, it does sometimes lead to injuries, from minor bruises and scrapes to broken bones and concussions. But before we dive headlong into the history of cheese rolling, let's explore what the event is like today. The premise of the Cooper's Hill cheese roll is fairly straightforward. Roll the cheese down a hill, pursued by a pack of hopeful chasers. The one to catch the cheese or the first to reach the bottom wins the cheese as a prize. However, the reality is not quite so simple, partially because Cooper's Hill is not some gently undulating slope, but a steep plunge that risks serious injury. This is one description of the race venue. Rather than a gradual incline, the hill drops away at a near 70-degree angle, then quickly shifts to 50 degrees, then plunges again, then levels out, then falls one last time before abruptly flattening out, leaving runners only a few yards to stop before crashing into a cottage fence at the bottom. The 250-yard, 230-metre racecourse is a short, sharp drop full of dips, bulges, and any number of perils, seen or unseen. Long, ankle-twisting grass, patches of slick, decomposing leaves, gravel outcrops lurking under the turf, tufted islands jutting up unexpectedly, eroded foot traps masked by grass, not to mention big, fat Roman snails, and the odd duck's nest. In short, the hill is a natural obstacle course containing just about every impediment Mother Nature could come up with, making it difficult to walk down, let alone run. The race course is a key part of the event. It's steep, making getting from the top to the bottom a challenge in itself. So the spectators are there for the spectacle of people tripping, rolling, and pretty much falling headlong down the hill. Winning the race seems as much about luck as skill. Although having said that, there are many people who have won the race multiple times. Because it's a rather unique event, it's not difficult to find vivid descriptions of it. Here's a description of the 2024 event. Daredevils have thrown themselves down a steep hill in the annual death-defying cheese rolling race in Gloucestershire. Brave competitors sprinted, tripped and tumbled down Cooper's Hill in Brockworth to try and win the 8-pound double Gloucester. The recent wet weather made the racetrack soft, slippery and very muddy for the competitors who were cheered on by thousands of spectators. The 2024 race had competitors from all over the world. The winners of the 4 races were from Germany, Australia, America and a local from Gloucester. The BBC has even live-streamed the event in recent years, suggesting that there is a wide audience for such spectacle. So if you're watching this before the final Monday in May, you may want to see if you can view the live stream if you can't make it to Cooper's Hill in person, if you want to see what this is like. Otherwise, there are plenty of clips of the races on YouTube. I'll link some in the description below. So cheese rolling is an annual event at Cooper's Hill that has a devoted following of racers and spectators from all around the world. But how long has it been going on? When did people first start chasing cheeses down Cooper's Hill? The question of when this tradition started is hard to answer. The earliest date I've seen refers to a record in 1826 of a message from the Gloucester town crier, but no one ever gives any indication of what that message said or where it could be found. So I haven't managed to track down the original yet. Also, other sources have different dates, such as the Guinness World Records having 1836. because of course there's a record for the longest running cheese rolling event, and Cooper's Hill holds that record. By all accounts, the 1826 record isn't about a new event either, but one that's already been going on for a while. So there are theories that this cheese rolling event is at least several hundred years older than that, if not more than 1,000 years old. The cheese traditionally chased downhill is a Gloucester cheese, usually double Gloucester. But Gloucester cheese as we know it today only really comes into the scene in the 16th century or so. So if cheese rolling is older than the 16th century, some other type must have been used prior to its development. I'm not going to focus on the history of Gloucester cheese in this video, mainly because the type of cheese is fairly irrelevant to the history of the event. You really only need some sort of wheel of cheese to chase down a hill, and wheels of cheese have been around in England since at least Roman times, and possibly even before. However, I do aim to cover the history of Gloucester cheese sometime in the future, so you can always subscribe and use the bell notification thingy so you're notified about future videos about cheese history. Without more evidence, it's impossible to say for sure when cheese rolling started at Cooper's Hill, but I think it's fair to say that it probably goes back further than 1826, and they've likely been chasing Gloucester cheese for a good chunk of that time. But why did the folk of Brockworth start chasing cheese down a hill in the first place? The question of why they do this is not easy to answer, partially because, as I said, we don't have records of the early days of cheese rolling at Cooper's Hill. But that never stops us coming up with theories. One theory is that it was a way for medieval peasants to keep their rights to graze their animals on the common lands of the area. This use of common land was a typical medieval practice, but it's difficult to see how rolling a cheese down a hill would help to preserve the right to access that land. In England, the practice of enclosing common land increased in the 16th century, restricting access to a lot of formerly common land, and it was backed up by several laws over the years. Much of the common land around Brockworth was enclosed by 1794. So it doesn't seem that plausible to me that rolling a cheese down a local hill would help the residents of Brockworth to keep access to their common land, and also why they would carry that practice on after the land was enclosed. The more mystical and intriguing theory is that the cheese rolling started as part of an ancient pagan fertility rite that the Celts observed around midsummer, when the sun was at its height and the days were longest. It's possible that part of the celebration involved rolling flaming wheels representing the sun down Cooper's Hill to try to prevent the days from getting shorter. There's some evidence of rituals like this practiced by the Celts in France, and there were similar events elsewhere in England which have all since died out. If the townsfolk around Cooper's Hill started by chasing burning wheels, then a shift to cheese at some point in the event's history, because it has a wheel shape and a decreased chance of setting everything on fire, is not difficult to imagine. Whatever the ancient origins of the cheese rolling practice, we know that at some point in its history it became a central part of the Cooper's Hill Wake, which took place every year on Whit Monday, which is the Monday after Pentecost. A wake was the name for a local celebration, particularly in parts of the Midlands and north of England. It appears to get its name from an older practice from before the English Reformation, when the devout Catholics in an area would stay up at their church before a religious festival, keeping watch throughout the night. Of course, over time the term shifted to apply to the festival itself, particularly after the Reformation when most Catholic practices were suppressed. The wake would involve a whole lot of events other than cheese rolling too. There were sack races, wrestling matches, fist fights, bobbing for apples, dancing competitions around a maypole erected for the event, and lots of food and drink. Basically, it included all the events typical of an English fair at the time. The annual wake at Cooper's Hill was held until the 1930s, when the aftermath of the First World War and the Great Depression claimed it as another victim. The cheese rolling was the only event that survived, and since then there have been several occasions when it looked like even cheese rolling might not continue. During World War II, up until rationing in Britain ended in 1954, a whole wheel of cheese could be hard to come by, and there was no way the extravagance of chasing one down a hill was going to be tolerated. So during these years, a fake wooden cheese was rolled instead. There have also been 4 occasions in recent years when the Cooper's Hill cheese rolling race couldn't take place. The first was in 2001 because of an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. The second was only 2 years later in 2003 when the safety team who helped maintain order at the event was sent to Algeria to assist with the aftermath of an earthquake there. Then of course, the event was cancelled twice in 2020 and 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. On each occasion the cheese was still rolled down the hill, but there was no one there to chase after it. The race stopped being held officially in the late 2010s. Due to increasing numbers of people attending, the organisers wanted to limit numbers by selling tickets so they could better ensure the health and safety of all those involved. They also wanted to change the date to sometime in June. However, the public were having none of it, and the pushback forced the organisers to cancel 3 events in a row between 2009 and 2011. But each of those years, and every year since then, the fans have held the event unofficially anyway. These unofficial events have meant that a cheese has been rolled down Cooper's Hill since at least the 1820s, even if there wasn't always someone there to chase it, which is what makes it the world's longest running cheese rolling race. It seems that for many competitors today, the reason they chase a cheese downhill is because why not? So the reasons why the tradition started are up for debate, but it continues because people think it's a tradition worth preserving, regardless of concerns about safety. But does anywhere else in the UK have cheese rolling events? There are a couple of other places that hold events similar to the Cooper's Hill cheese rolling, but each have their own distinctive flavour, both of cheese and how the events are run. One of them also uses Gloucester cheese because it takes place in Randwick, which is south of Cooper's Hill near Stroud, but still in Gloucestershire. They don't roll the cheese down a hill though. Instead, groups of children from the town roll 3 double Gloucester cheeses round the Church of St John the Baptist on the first Sunday in May. So it's a bit earlier than Cooper's Hill. One of the 3 cheeses is then eaten by all those gathered, but the other 2, they are saved until the following Saturday, when they're rolled down a steep footpath as part of the Randwick Wap. No one chases these cheeses though. The origins of the Randwick Wap are as debated as the Cooper's Hill cheese rolling, with the term wap being possibly linked to the Saxon word Wappenshaw, which was a time when all the men of an area were gathered in what we would sort of think of as a review of the troops. If that was the case, then over time it became more of a May Day celebration, with processions through the streets, dancing, food, drink, and all manner of other entertainment. The current Randwick Wap was revived in the 1970s. Then there's Stilton cheese rolling, which started in 1959 after the A1 main trunk road bypassed the town. It takes place at the same time as the Cooper's Hill cheese rolling, the spring bank holiday. And as everything cheese related in Stilton, it all centres around local pubs. This is how the story of its inception goes. Around this time, the landlord of a local pub who had seen a big drop in his revenue decided to revive an ancient local custom, or so he claimed. He began to roll a Stilton cheese along the road in front of his establishment. Naturally, people were curious, so they began to stand and watch and wonder what he was doing. On explaining that it was an ancient custom, some people began to join him until it became quite a popular pastime. As well as having the desired effect of drawing people into his pub and the village in general, a new sport was born, or perhaps even reborn if there is any element of truth in his convincing claims. The event itself is very different to both Cooper's Hill and Randwick. In Stilton, teams of 4 men or women roll a wooden cheese, painted and shaped like it's a real Stilton cheese, on the ground along a short course. This course used to be along one of the town's main streets, but now the event takes place at the Stilton Pavilion and the races are run along a nearby road. Every member of the team has to roll the cheese at least once, and they're encouraged to participate in fancy dress. Last year, 2024, was the first time since 2017 that the Stilton cheese rolling event had happened, having been cancelled after the number of attendees declined over the years. And it's scheduled to go ahead this year, 2025 as well. There used to be other cheese rolling events too. Chester used to include cheese rolling in its annual food and drink festival, which takes place over Easter. There, a wheel of Cheshire cheese would be carried around the city before being rolled along one of the ancient cobbled streets, similar to the Stilton cheese rolling races. However, I can find no mention of cheese rolling on the festival's website for this year, which is a shame. So it turns out that cheese rolling, like cheese, comes in many different shapes and sizes. At Cooper's Hill, it's a terrifying plunge down a steep slope in pursuit of a wheel of double Gloucester. At Randwick, wheels of double Gloucester are rolled around the church and then down a hill as part of a local festival. And in Stilton, fake wheels of Stilton cheese are raced by teams along the street. These events all now happen in May. So if you find yourself in any of these areas in May, it might be worth checking out some of the various types of cheese rolling. Personally, I wouldn't chase anything down Cooper's Hill. It looks like too much of a guaranteed trip to hospital for my liking. However, if I wasn't all the way over on the other side of the world, I would be trying to attend each of these events, just to see what they're like. If you have ever attended or taken part in any of these events, do let me know about them down in the comments. I'd love to hear about what they're like in person. An extra special thanks goes to my patrons over on Patreon, one of whom suggested that I look into the history of cheese rolling. I have to say, it did not disappoint. So thank you so much. You know who you are. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time for more cheese history.